PlayStation 5 sold for only 50 cents. This iPad Pro sold for less than $34. And this Nintendo Switch sold for less than $20.
I got this KitchenAid stand mixer for only $56.
I got this barbecue smoker for 26 bucks.
And shipping is always free.
Go to DealDash.com right now and see how much you can save.
Good morning and welcome to this special holiday edition of Morning Joe, bringing you some of our best recent segments. Let's dive right in.
Hey, Gene, we're going to bring in George Packer in 1 minute. But I thought before we did that, we're going to set this up. And then we're going to cross-examine George. I think George is one of the best and the brightest.
I don't think that's what he signed up for.
I don't think it's what he signed up for. I'd love having him on because he's very insightful. But right now, I'm so glad he's on because there's a debate. I think I may be on one side of that debate. And I talked about it earlier. I'm curious what your thought is. You know, there's a lot of talk about how the Democratic Party has to re-examine everything they've done. And I've talked about, massive gains in Texas, in Florida, in Middle America. That is true. But there is another side of that. The slimmest majority in the House of Representatives since Herbert Hoover. You got a 3-vote margin in the United States Senate. And then if you go state by state, less than 1 percentage point in Wisconsin, about less than 1.5 percentage points in Michigan, about 1.5 percentage points in Pennsylvania. That's the difference between a Democratic president and a Republican president. Also, one other thing, when everybody talks about the rise of the far right and everything else, Donald Trump got less votes in 2024 than he got in 2020. Now, I'm not here to say people voted against Kamala Harris in large numbers because she was a woman or because she was a black woman, even though the United States of America almost stands alone in not electing women to the top spot, right? But you look at these states, right? You and I remember, like, 1972, 1984, even 1980. Remember Burt Bye, all of those Democrats that got swept out in these landslides. Kamala Harris barely lost Wisconsin. Tammy Baldwin, Democratic senator, won. Kamala Harris barely lost Michigan, and yet Elissa Slotkin won. She lost Pennsylvania, but man, they had to go a couple of weeks before figuring out whether Bob Casey had won or lost. So again, we're talking about the thinnest of margins. So this is one of those things we say all the time, two things can be true at once. I believe Democrats need to examine what they've done. At the same time, let's not pretend that this was like a 1984 style landslide. This was an election within the margin of errors. And in those 3 swing states up north, if Harris wins, gets an extra 1.5%, 2%, she's president. So are you going to blow everything up for 1.5%?
Yeah, you're not. I mean, in my opinion, you're not. You're gonna settle down. You're gonna get back, step back from the ledge, and you're going to. Yes, you're going to look at a loss because you did lose the election, but no, you're not gonna blow everything up. The country is very evenly divided, and these elections are close one way or the other. If I were advising the Democratic Party, I would say one thing you really need to look at is your declining share among Latino voters. I don't think the Democratic Party understands the Latino community or Latino voters, because there are actually a number of different communities. They don't understand that portion of the electorate well enough, and it's a growing portion of the electorate that needs to be understood. But no, I don't think you have to start from scratch and say let's tear down the entire Democratic Party and build a new one. You did, after all, go into the this election with a Black and South Asian woman at the head of the ticket. And while we didn't talk about that a whole lot, nonetheless, this is the United States of America, and I don't think you'll ever convince me that that had no impact on the result. And again, we're talking 1.5%.
1%.
One way or the other. So, you know.
So to that
this
point,
is what happened.
Yeah, but to that point, there is some hard realities and some major work to be done to make for a resounding win so that those issues don't. Let's bring in staff writer for The Atlantic, George Packer, who writes for the publication's new issue about the end of democratic delusions, arguing the 2024 election has launched us into a new era, one he calls the Trump reaction. I thought we were already in that era. Anyhow, MSNBC contributor Mike Barnicle joins the conversation as well. Good to have you, Mike.
Mr. Packer, we have presented our opening argument. We turn it over to you, the prosecution. Go.
Yeah, I suddenly got the feeling as I was watching earlier that I had actually signed up for a firing squad here.
No.
I will do my best. Look, first of all, don't put me in a corner where I never went. I am not saying the Democratic Party is finished and needs to be rebuilt from scratch. You've been talking about some historical parallels. I would draw an analogy, and Joe, you remember, to 1968 when Richard Nixon barely defeated the incumbent vice president, who had taken over for the incumbent president who had withdrawn from the race. That was a really close election, but it signaled a change, a big change, which was the end really of New Deal liberalism. It didn't happen all at once. It took maybe 12 years until Ronald Reagan swept it away in 1980. But that's where I'm looking more a trend, which is the trend toward populism, right-wing populism. It's a global phenomenon. Yes, Mika, you're right. It's been coming in this country for 8 years. But the fact that Donald Trump won again, despite being pretty unpopular, despite having tried to overthrow an election, despite being a convicted felon, tells me that trend, that sentiment in the public to get rid of old institutions, to overthrow the status quo, it's a really strong one, strong enough to reelect this, I would say, degenerate felon. And Democrats would be foolish not to look at that and say, we may be defending a status quo that the country has had enough of.
So, George, in the piece that you wrote for The Atlantic, I mean, you outline a couple of periods of time. 1964, massive Democratic majority elected the 89th Congress. Their majority lasted basically until 1980 when the Reagan Revolution began. 1980, you can argue the Reagan Revolution continued, probably ended in 2003 with George W. Bush taking us into Iraq. But what at least I didn't gather from the piece was the impact of an outside force called the culture on our politics. Did not that change everything in terms of persuasion? iPhones, the internet, Twitter, the impact that the culture had on our politics was far more important, I think, than any candidate, any specific candidate.
I think that's a great point, Mike. I did talk about the challenge for journalists in an age where facts had ceased to exist. There's simply no way to make facts stick with billionaire-owned platforms pouring disinformation and lies and propaganda at followers and account holders every minute of every day, which is unlike anything the media has ever seen before. So in a way, it's a bigger problem even than I've said, because Democrats are talking about what new policies might work to bring back Latino voters, to bring back younger voters, to bring back especially working class voters. Well, what if policies and the facts that you bring to support those policies no longer matter, no longer stick with voters, and instead, as you say, Mike, it's culture, it's emotion, it's images, and its lies, which people have become unable to separate from the truth. That's something that worries me more than Kash Patel running the FBI. That worries me too.
George, there's been so much talk in the last 4 weeks about soul searching in the Democratic Party, how it needs to change the way it talks to voters, how it needs to change its message and its appeal. That's easier said than done. That's a reputation that's been earned over decades, which is, as you write about in the piece, this anti-elitism which has been stuck to Democrats. Now Donald Trump, the billionaire with an apartment on Fifth Avenue who lives at a castle by the beach, is the man of the people, but he has made that sale. So how do Democrats begin to pull back some of the message that the party was built on so many years ago, which is reaching out to working class voters?
I mean, I am not someone that the party should turn to for political advice. I don't like to play that role. But as I say in the piece, I think the party is strongest when it focuses on economics and on especially the economics of struggling people in this country and what they need and what they want, and not on cultural issues that are divisive and that divide the Democratic Party within itself, even as much as it divides Democrats from Republicans. And I think the gradual but really long-term change in the identity of the party from a working class-based party to an educated professional party has given it some new voters, but mostly it's lost voters. And that trend continued in 2024. In New York City, where I am right now, where I live, the boroughs that showed Trump's vote increase were the working class and non-white majority boroughs, Queens, Bronx. The borough where Harris's vote increased over Biden's was Manhattan, among white and well-to-do voters. That's not a future the Democratic Party can win on.
All right, George Packer, we
The
thank
new piece
you.
online now for The Atlantic.
Yeah, and we also thank the spirit of Orson Welles for providing the Citizen Kane-like lighting.
I mean,
in
seriously,
the shot,
this is very
George.
dramatic.
No, this is, I mean, this is...
It looks good.
Seriously? This
Yeah.
is,
No, Room Raiders going to kill me.
Orwellian.
Oh, no, Room Raider,
You're a Room Raider 0.
No, on 5 stars, you set a new standard. All right, George, thank you.
George.
Coming up, a look at the search for a new leader of the Democratic National Committee. We'll be joined by one of the candidates, Wisconsin Democratic Party Chair Ben Wickler. Morning Joe is coming right back with that.
This is the exact same color as my skin. Ooh, look at the coverage. Oh my God, guys. I love how easy the quiz was online. I just got my shade dead spot on.
I took that 90-second quiz on their website to match me perfectly. Insane. You guys can try this for free 14 days. It feels like I have nothing on my face.
Download Caesar Slots now for free. Enjoy breathtaking slots, huge jackpots, and a chance to win a $777 Amazon gift card. New winner every hour!
What causes a curve down there? Is it Peyronie's disease?
Will it get worse? How common is it? Who can I talk to? Can this be treated?
Stop typing, start talking to a specialized urologist because it could be Peyronie's disease, or PD. It's a medical condition where there is a curve in the erection caused by a formation of scar tissue, and an estimated 1 in 10 men may have it. But PD can be treated even without surgery. Say goodbye to searching online. Find a specialized urologist who can diagnose PD and build a treatment plan with you. Visit makeapdplan.com today.
My moderate to severe ulcerative colitis symptoms kept me out of the picture. Now I have Skyrizi.
Keeping my plan.